Our keynote speaker this morning is Commander Darren Nelson, a native of Rushville, Nebraska, who commands the USS Arlington, which was built from metal scraps from the attack on the Pentagon. So please welcome Commander Nelson.
Hopefully my voice will last. I was down at the football game last night, so as you can imagine, I was yelling at the first half and cheering in the second half. I want to thank you all for letting me speak here today. I want to thank the Veterans Memorial Garden Advisory Board for asking me to be here today. It's a big honor and a pleasure to be here. You know, as a boy from small town of Rushville, Nebraska, and a UNL alumnus, this is truly a huge honor for me to be here today. I know we've already recognized the veterans. I'd be remiss, and I think my wife would hurt me badly if I didn't ask the spouses to stand up one more time, because everybody knows the toughest job in the military is a Navy or a military spouse. So please stand up, please. Because we all know we follow orders, not just from the president. As we gather here today to remember those who died 10 years ago in the 3 separate attacks on American soil, we also need to remember those that have paid the ultimate sacrifice in Iraq and Afghanistan, fighting to make sure a similar tragedy never happens again. I know that Nebraska particularly has suffered, with over 70 Nebraskans lost, paying the ultimate price for our freedom in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. I want to extend my personal gratitude to them and to their families. This day is very special for me for 3 different reasons. First of all, like most of you, we all remember where we were and what we were doing on this day 10 years ago. This day has been etched into our memories, and as well as other tragic events, like for our World War II vets, Pearl Harbor, JFK's assassination, the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster, just to name a few. For most of us, we can remember exact details of what we were doing on those fateful days. For me, on 9/11, I was a young lieutenant. I was standing watch as tactical action officer on board USS Ingraham off the coast of India. We were on a normal Fifth Fleet deployment. I was the first person aboard the Ingraham to actually find out about the events happening on 9/11. As tactical action officer, my job was to monitor chat, and believe it or not, we got the first words of the airplanes hitting the Twin Towers via chat. We were operating with, I was getting that information from the carrier. The carrier system was able to get a live CNN feed via the Armed Forces network. Unfortunately, my ship system that carried that same network was broken. And for 3 days, I had a nice seaman that worked for me, working round the clock to get that system back up. As you can imagine, the rest of that deployment was nothing normal. It wasn't till probably several minutes after reading some of these chats that I actually understood the gravity of the situation. And again, it will never be a normal deployment. As commanding officer of the USS Arlington, named for the 9/11 attacks on the Pentagon in Arlington County, Virginia, I often ask people when I meet them one question: where were you on that day? And please tell me your story. When I first checked into my position, I met with my boss, Admiral Thomas, and asked him for his 9/11 story. He told me he was working in the Pentagon at that day, and he was there that day, and basically left it at that. I later read a book about the attack on the Pentagon, and inside that was his story. When Flight 77 hit the Pentagon, it hit the Navy Command Center, and my boss, like most sailors, ran to the fire and ran into the burning area to look for survivors or to help extinguish the fire. Because as U.S. sailors, we're taught to fight fires and flooding, because out at sea we just can't, run away and call somebody. So it's kind of if we want to survive, we have to attack the fires. Anyway, my boss ran into the fire knowing his best friend, who he had just talked to about 10 minutes before, was on the watch floor in the Navy command post. He went into the fire with burning plastic dripping down on him from the wires in the overhead, and the fumes and the smoke from the burning jet fuel that filling his lungs. Yet he continued going on and going into the damaged area, knowing he had to see if anyone was still alive. He soon came to an officer trapped at his desk with filing cabinets and wires pinning him in place. My boss and another officer found him at about the same time, though they had entered the space from opposite directions. Finally, after several minutes of pushing and pulling, they freed that officer, and as they walked out through the hole that Flight 77 created onto the Pentagon lawn, the area that they were just in collapsed behind them. Like most first responders, whether they're civilian, or police, or fire, or rescue teams, or just civilians helping out, they never consider themselves to be heroes, just simply because maybe they didn't help save everyone, or they were just doing their job. Well, I consider them heroes, and I'm grateful to have them on our side. Secondly, as I stated earlier, USS Arlington is named for the Pentagon attacks, and the Pentagon is in Arlington County, Virginia. So as commanding officer, it's my responsibility to train the crew and outfit the ship so when the shipyard is done building this awesome warship, our sailors can take it out to sea and defend our great nation from our enemies. To take our enemies on, or to keep our enemies on the run and on the defensive so they can never be able to attack us again. The United States Navy is our country's true away team. In Nebraska terms, we're the black shirts. We can go anywhere in the world on short notice, and we can park a carrier strike group or an amphibious readiness group off the coast of any foreign country. And we can let that country know that we mean business. We can strike hundreds of miles inland with our missiles, our planes, our Marines, our special forces, like the SEALs, as bin Laden learned a few months ago. And we could stay there for an indefinite amount of time. As you may know, 70% of the world is covered by ocean. 80% of the world's population live within 100 miles of the coasts. And 70% of our world, and also 90% of our world's economy, trade, and consumer goods travel via the sea lanes. So as Nebraskans, what does the United States Navy really mean to a landlocked state? Well, our corn, our wheat, our beef eventually makes it to the coast and travels via our sea lanes, via merchant ships. And it's the United States Navy has been defending these sea lanes ever since Thomas Jefferson, president at the time, sent the United States Navy to the Barbary Coast to fight against piracy. For those history buffs, the Barbary Coast, we are still sitting there today. That's the coast of Libya. It's also my duty and responsibility to make sure that the crew and the USS Arlington honor those 184 men, women, and yes, children that died in the Pentagon and on American Airlines Flight 77. To honor them properly, we have to be the best ship in the Navy, and to set a shining example for all to follow, and never forgetting our namesake, and never forgetting what we stand for as United States sailors. I'd like to read a quick poem that was given to me by one of the family members that lost loved one in the Pentagon. I think this really sums up what we as service members and as a country are doing to make this world a safer place for our children. Even as a phoenix rises from the flames, so flies the eagle, bearing freedom on its wings. Finally, this day is a celebration for me. As I talk with many of the family members that lost loved ones in the Pentagon, they don't want my ship, the USS Arlington, to be a floating memorial. Instead, they want it to be a celebration of life, and we intend to proudly do so. I also want to dedicate this speech to a fellow commanding officer. His name was Bob Dolan. He was a father of three, had command of the USS John Hancock. John Hancock's motto is "First in Freedom." After his commanding officer tour on board John Hancock, he went to work in the Pentagon and was on the Navy watch floor when Flight 77 hit. He did not survive. His career path is very similar to mine, and I've become great friends with his wife. So I'm honored to continue the watch in his place. Also, September 11th has been a day of celebration for me personally for the last 15 years. For today is my oldest daughter's birthday. My daddy's little girl. I knew this was going to be hard to get through. Happy birthday, sweetheart, and I'm sorry I missed another one. Excuse me. Because we as service members make great sacrifices every day, as our forefathers did more than 200 years ago when they signed the Declaration of Independence, and our fellow service members who have fought to defend our freedom and this great nation we call home. I want to thank all the first responders that serve our country today. While we as service members are on distant shores, they are here keeping our families safe from harm. For our families sacrifice probably the most. When we miss birthdays, anniversaries, and other special family events in our families' lives. We pay this price knowing that what we do keeps their freedom alive and allows them to live and grow up in the world's greatest country, the United States of America. Again, I'd like to thank you all for having me here today and let me speak to you. And I thank you for your support of the United States service members. God bless you, and God bless America.